So today's lecture is on Chapter 20, which is on the process costing system, which is for those companies who are mainly mass-producing products like ice cream. So by now you should have watched the video about a process costing manufacturing company. And this company will be assigning costs by department. So what we'll be focusing on is moving what has moved between departments. So here's an example of we start in the mixing department with direct material, and we're going to be adding a little direct labor and overhead there, and then we have a total amount of cost that gets transferred forward to packaging, and it's still a work in process at that point. We add some more direct labor and some more overhead. Notice we don't add any more material. In this chapter, we're going to be assuming that all direct material gets added in the first department. That's going to be important later. And then we're going to add more direct material, more overhead and packaging, and then we're going to transfer it on to being complete and a finished good. So we are going to keep up with this. We are going to be focusing on three main groups. And these groups are really key to understanding this chapter. So group one in each department is going to be our beginning work in process. So this is inventory that was started last month, but we didn't finish it. So it's beginning work in process this month. And then group two is going to be more inventory we started this period, but we also completed it. So this inventory got started and completed this month. Together, group 1 and 2 is going to be what's transferred out to the completed, either the completed inventory or to the next department. And then group 3 is what's an ending work in process. So we did start it this month, but we did not complete it. So next month it's going to be beginning work in process. This month it ends up in ending work in process. And then this is how we come up with our units that we need to assign costs to. So let's do a really long example. Here we have a skincare company. There are two departments that we're going to be focusing on. That is the mixing department and the filling department. The filling department received 45 ounces from mixing. During the period, 42.8 ounces were completed and included 4,000 of work in process at the beginning of the period. If ending work in process was 6,200 ounces, how many ounces were started and completed? So if we really just break this up into what are our three groups, then we can figure out what is beginning work in process. Basically what the problem is describing is that there's a mixing department and a filling department, and then when the departments or the product is complete. So it says that we started off with 4,000 ounces over in filling, and 45 ounces were transferred over from mixing, then 42.8 was transferred out to complete, and then we ended up with 62 ounces. So hopefully you can see that there are three groups here. There's a beginning work in process, which was 4,000 ounces. There's an ending work in process, 6,200 ounces, and we don't know what group 2 is. That's the question. How many ounces were started and completed, which is group 2? Well, if we know that transferred out, remember I told you ounces transferred out is going to be made up of group 1 and 2, we can figure out the answer, because here it says that 42,008 were completed and they were transferred out. So 42,008 is going to be the total ounces of group 1 and 2. So if you just take the difference, then your group 2 will be 38.8, and that's the answer to group 1. So it's just really terminology here. Completed and transferred out is going to be group 1 and 2. Started and completed is group 2. And that was what we were looking for. So these are the ounces that we're going to be carrying forward through the whole problem here. So same company, we are now going to determine the equivalent units for direct materials. Now we have to figure out what are the equivalent units because we started off with some partially complete, we are ending with some partially complete, and then we started and completed some. So we can't just like add up all those units, you're going to be duplicating some. So we have to come up with a unit number to determine how much it costs to apply. We have to come up with units that are equivalent based on those partials, beginning and ending. So we're going to do that by 3 groups. So 1, 2, 3, and we're going to be in the filling department here. And we know that 4,000 ounces were in beginning work in process, and 42.8 were completed and transferred out. So we know that means 38.8 is group 2, because these two together is going to be what was completed. So they don't come right out and tell you what group 2 is, but you can figure it out because group 1 and 2 is what was completed. And then group 3 is given 6,200 ounces. So we went through that just a few minutes ago. So when we are working on what are the equivalent units for direct material, we are always going to be assuming that costs associated with these materials were added at the beginning. So if the 4,000 units was beginning last month and it was already in process, that means the material was already added. So this month, we don't need to add any more materials. Now for those units that were started and completed this period, since we started them this period, we need to add the direct materials this period. So we're going to add 100% of the materials to group 2 this period. And ending WIP started this month, but we didn't finish it. But since it started in this period, all the materials are going to get added this period. So to get the equivalent units for this period, you multiply number of ounces times the percentage we're going to add this month. So that means none from group 1, 38.8 from group 2, and 6,200 ounces from group 3. So totally equivalent units for direct materials is going to be 45,000 units. So later on, when we're trying to determine costs, we're going to use 45,000 units when we're talking about material costs. Now we have to separate that from conversion costs. So conversion cost is going to include direct labor and overhead. And so we're going to be using different percentages for those because we add those all along the way. So we're going to separate into 3 groups again. And this is the same problem. So we're using the same unit still. And now we're going to be focusing in on these percentage completes. Up at the direct materials, we are not concerned with 70% complete or 40% complete. That relates to conversion costs. Direct material equivalent units, you are always going to have 0, then 100, then 100. It's always going to be like that for direct material. For conversion costs, it depends on what the problem says. So it says that 70% complete was group 1, and that ending work in process was 40% complete. So let's talk through that. Because if group 1 was beginning work in process, so that means it was 70% complete last period, how much more needs to be completed this period? That means 30% more of the costs are left. So that's group 1. Group 2 started and completed this month, so 100% of those direct labor and overhead, the conversion costs, are going to be added this month. And then in group 3, this group was started this month. So if it's 40% complete, that means that 40% of those costs were completed this month because it was started this month. So you're going to put 40 in group 3. Next month, group 3 will become group 1, and the other 60% will get added. So now we can multiply all the way across. There's going to be 1,200 units for group 1, 38.8 for group 2, and 2480 for group 3. So total equivalent units, when we start adding in the costs for conversion costs, we're going to use 42,480 when we're adding conversion costs. That's how many equivalent units we'll use. So now we can move on and we can say, okay, we know how many equivalent units we're going to use. What did all of the material and conversion costs cost us in dollars? So the problem says here that direct material cost us $20,250 and conversion costs were $6,372. So now we can come up with our per unit cost. You take the cost divided by equivalent units. So up in step 2 and step 3, we determine those equivalent units, and here you're given the cost. So let's do materials first. Material cost us $20,250. Looking up in step 2, we had 45,000 units made with that cost. And then, so that's going to be basically 45 cents a unit is going to be added. And then for conversion costs, 6,372, that made 42,480 units. So that is 15 cents per unit. So now, and when we're adding up all of our total costs, those are the units, the unit cost that we will use. So that took 4 or 5 steps to get there. And then in our final step, we can answer these main questions. What is the total cost completed and transferred out? So we're not talking about units here, we're talking about dollars. And then what is the dollars of ending inventory? So we got to set this up in groups again. We're basically going to put it all together. Okay, we're going to use the 4,000, we're using equivalent units. So here we had equivalent units. If you go up to step 2, you'll see those are our equivalent units for material. And then we're going to use our equivalent units for conversion cost. And we'll put that here. And we're going to multiply those times that per unit cost. And we're going to add those together to equal up our total. And forgot to add in here the very top that we already know the cost of our beginning work in process. So now I know you're thinking, we already know the beginning work in process, but that was units. We're talking about dollars over here. So we're trying to make everything in dollars. So from last period, we had dollars in beginning work in process, completed, dollars that were completed, 25,000. And now we're trying to come up with what was the amount completed and transferred out this period. So if you multiply this together and this together and add it up, it should be 180. And then in group 2, 23,280, And then in group 3, 3162. So the first question is, what is the cost completed and transferred out? That's going to include beginning dollars and group 1 and 2. So if you add up all of that together, that should be $48,460 is going to be completed and transferred out. And then our last question is, what is our ending work in process? So our ending work in process is what we have in group 3. So ending work in process is 3162. And that's the answer in dollars. Okay, so that was a really long problem, but that should help you with going through the practice that I've posted for you along with the answers. And then make sure you do that practice before you attempt your homework, and then let me know if you have any questions. Okay, good luck.